Have you ever paid cash to a builder for the odd home improvement? Or perhaps bought fruit from a street vendor who lacked the required hygiene certificate? Maybe you have employed a maid or a nanny and have never got around to filing all that paperwork for Social Security? So, if so, then depending on your local laws, you may have been participating in what economists call the informal or gray economy. My Pichakucha will focus on informality and its definition, characteristic, history, statistics, social and political implications and issues, gender, poverty, children, and expansion and growth. The informal economy is often thought of as something found at the margin of poor countries, such as stands in Thailand or roadside vendor in Ghana, but that is misleading. Although it represents a greater share of total output in poor countries, it exists in rich and poor places alike. Over 1 billion people live in urban communities without legal claim to the land they live on. The rise in informal housing is often driven by mass migration to cities by people seeking work or fleeing from conflict and environmental disaster. Informal status refers to more than just housing. In Jakarta, the personal ID serves as an invisible divider between formal and informal residents, and it's used as an excuse for denying rights to the marginalized population. Many government officials around the world complain about illegal residences and business activity in their cities because this part of the economy is neither taxed nor monitored by any form of government. Unlike the formal economy, activities of the informal economy are not included in the gross national product (GNP) and gross domestic product (GDP) of a country. Although the informal sector makes up a significant portion of the economies in developing countries, it is often stigmatized as trouble and unmanageable. Informality, both in housing and livelihood generation, has often been as a social ill and described either in terms of what participants lack or wish to avoid taxes. However, the informal sector provides critical economic opportunities for the poor and has been expanding rapidly. The informal sector largely characterized by several qualities. Easy entry, meaning everyone who wishes to join the sector can find some sort of work, which will result in cash earnings, a lack of stable employer employee relationships, a small scale of operations, and skills gained outside of formal education. The type of work that makes up the informal economy is diverse, particularly in terms of capital invested, technology used, income generated. The spectrum ranges from self-employment or unpaid family labor to street vendors, shoe shiners, and junk collectors. The most prevalent types of work in the informal economy are home-based workers and street vendors. Home-based workers are more numerous while street vendors are more visible. On the high end of the spectrum are upper-tier informal activities such as small-scale service or manufacturing businesses, which have more limited entry. The upper-tier informal activities have higher setup costs, which might include complicated licensing, regulations, and irregular hours of operation. However, most workers in the informal sector, even those who are employed, self-employed, or wage workers, do not have access to secure work, benefits, welfare protection, or representation. The informal sector was historically recognized as an opposition to formal economy, meaning it included all income earnings activities beyond legally regulated enterprises. However, this understanding is too inclusive and vague, and certain activities that could be included by that definition are not considered part of the informal economy. The International Labour Organization defined the informal sector in 2002. The informal sector does not include the criminal economy. There's a sharp difference between illegal, in the sense of dangerous criminal behavior, and illegal in the sense of people doing things that lawmakers do not want them to do. Note that the lawmakers, almost by definition, are the upper class in any city and country. Sometimes they just pass a law or regulation to stop something they don't like, even if that law is really harmful to the livelihood of most of the urban population. Since the elite set the rules, they can declare when others break the rules. By classifying the activities as illegal, elites can disparage whole population by associating them with criminality. The informal economy, under any governing system, is diverse and includes small-scale, occasional members, often street vendors and garbage recyclers, as well as larger, regular enterprises include transit systems. Statistics on the informal economy are unreliable by virtue of the subject, yet they can provide a tentative picture of its relevance. For example, informal employment makes up 48% of non-agricultural employment in North Africa, 51% in Latin America, 65% in Asia, and 72% in sub-Saharan Africa. If agricultural employment is included, the percentage rise, and in some countries like in India and many sub-Saharan countries beyond 90%. The informal economy is also much larger than what most people realize, with women and children playing a huge role. The working poor, particularly women and children, are concentrated in the informal economy, and most low-income households rely on the sector to provide for them. Female representation in the informal sector is attributed to a variety of factors. One such factor is the fact that employment in the informal sector is the source of employment that is most readily available to women. Other factors are cultural norms, religious seclusion, and illiteracy among women in many developing countries, along with a greater commitment to family responsibility, prevent women from entering the formal sector. Children work in the formal economy in many parts of the world. They often work as scavengers, collecting recyclables from the street and dump sites, day laborers, cleaners, construction workers, vendors, in season activities, domestic workers, and in small workshops, and often work under hazardous and exploitative conditions. It is common for children to work as domestic servants across Latin America and part of Asia. These children are very vulnerable to exploitation. Often they are not allowed to take breaks or are required to work long hours. Many suffer from lack of access to education, which can contribute to social isolation and lack of future opportunity. The informal sector has been expanding as more economies have started to liberalize. This pattern of expansion began in the 1960s when a lot of developing countries didn't create enough formal jobs in their economic development plans, which led to the formation of an informal sector that didn't solely include marginal work and actually contained profitable opportunities. In the 1990s, an increase in global communication and competition led to a restructuring production and distribution, often relying more heavily on the informal sector. Over the past decade, the informal economy is said to account for more than half of the newly created jobs in Latin America. In Africa, it accounts for around 80%. Finally, employers could be turning towards the informal sector to lower costs and cope with increased competition. Additionally, the informal sector can allow a large proportion of the population to escape extreme poverty and earn an income that is satisfactory for survival. From the viewpoint of governments, the informal sector can create a vicious cycle. Being unable to collect taxes from the informal sector, the government may be hindered in financing public services, which in turn makes the sector more attractive. Firstly, some governments view informality as benefit, enable excess labor to be observed, and mitigating unemployment issues. In a 2014 report monitoring vending, Vigo suggested urban planners and local economic development strategists study to carrying capacity of areas regularly used by informal workers and deliver the urban infrastructure necessary to support the informal economy, including running water and toilets, street lights, and regular electricity, and adequate shelter and storage facility. That study is also called for basic legal rights and protection for informal workers, such as appropriate licensing and permit practice.